She's giving a talk here at Temple Israel on a new novel, The Shiksa Syndrome. What are some of the more interesting reactions that you've received to your new book? Yeah, let's have a look.
The Shiksa Syndrome. The more interesting, the Daily News said that it was Shiksa with a Gentile touch. That was sweet. The Jerusalem Post gave it a stellar review and talked a great deal about this being a very real issue, particularly among Reform people, how I got to a T, this whole kind of Reform Jewish singles, Upper West Side New York thing, and I would agree. I feel like I did. Some people are upset. They feel the word shiksa is pejorative, and they don't even want to know from it. Another person was really upset that they felt I didn't take this issue on in a very heavy-handed way. They wish a writer of some repute would really deal with this.
Deal with what?
That it exists, and I really felt like I dealt with it. I dealt with it just the way I wanted to. I observed it through the eyes of one person and what she does, and she accidentally, it's not premeditated, passes for shiksa and plays along, stays that way in the charade to get this Jewish guy who ultimately may not even be worth getting and isn't that invested in Judaism to begin with. But the point is that it is a case-by-case. It's a case-by-case thing in real life, and the book examines one person.
Now, what was that Pitchathon that you went to, and how did that go?
Well, I had gone to the Jewish Book Council and presented this book to have speaking engagements all over the country, and there were a few cities. I did not get many, there were a few cities that came up to me and said that they could not use that word in their community, that it was pejorative, and somebody else said that it's just too controversial a topic. And I said in 2008, I think that for anything, first of all, they didn't even read the book, so they don't even know how I handled it. And the handling of it, again, is through the eyes of this one woman, Amy Albert, who's 39, in her position, in her given circumstances. So it doesn't speak for every Jewish woman, every non-Jewish woman, for every denomination on both sides. It's one person's, adventure to ultimately to her own authenticity and her own peace and what's right for her. But in terms of controversy, I think that if it is, then it doesn't solve anything to ignore it and not talk about it.
So has the connotation of the word shiksa changed in your lifetime? Or?
I think so. It was never a pejorative as far as I was concerned. If it was, I don't think I would have thought to title the book The Shiksa Syndrome. But I do think it's also changed in that I don't even think it means non-Jewish woman anymore. I was on the phone the other day with Shape magazine, and I said the Shiksa Syndrome, and the editor said to me, she laughed. I said, "Oh, you know what a shiksa is?" And she said, "Yes, I do. It means a blonde Gentile woman who likes Jewish men." And it was so funny, like it was about the woman. She made it about the woman, as opposed to the male's desire, which is my intent with the Shiksa Syndrome. Like, he suffers a little Shiksa Syndrome. And that's one piece of it. And the other piece of it was like an attractive blonde. It just means a non-Jewish woman. It doesn't mean California blonde. But that's what it's come to be known as. The Shiksa goddess is known as this kind of Barbie doll, this blonde Shiksa Barbie that Jewish men perhaps salivate over, so that's it's a little bit iconic in its own way.
Why do you think some Jewish men salivate over shiksas, and how widespread is this, and why?
I don't have data for how widespread it is, but I do know that there's a there's a real attraction for other, and I think that that's enticing. I think to some extent, because we are a tribe, it could feel potentially inbred, familial, maybe not quite as sexy, a little bit maybe like you're dating your mom, or you're afraid that she'll become your mom if it's a Jewish woman.
Mm-hmm.
I think those are some of the basic fears. But that's, again, the broad scope. That's not about individuals meeting and liking or not liking each other.
So, what's the attraction like? For me, I'm a Jewish male, and for me, the attraction is that it's much easier to objectify the shiksa.
Well, that's another thing, because and then that's another issue. That's in my other books. You have to kiss a lot of frogs. When men objectify women, and then there is no real intimacy. There's not going to be a real relationship. So that's kind of sad to me. That's kind of sad when people objectify. The energy into objectifying might be better spent into knowing and loving. So I guess it feels like it's non-threatening, like, oh, I'll never marry this woman. So I can just fool around, I can objectify, but I think it's dangerous because A, that's not true, that one, Jewish, I could never marry that woman. Well, sure, you could, and second of all, it just, objectification, which has happened a lot sexually with, I feel, the internet, because that's what it is on the internet. I think it's been bad for humans.
Is there an equivalent among Jewish women looking for the shagets?
I think that there is, but I don't think it's as drastic. I think a woman, it may be more like she met somebody and he's not Jewish and she likes him because of these qualities, as opposed to setting her sights on that, on that shagets, I think.
How much have you encountered Shiksa Syndrome in your
my
life? Yeah.
It's there in my family with boys. It was very potent when I moved to Los Angeles, and I dated some of the very same men that I had dated in New York and moved out to LA, and things that I said in New York that were just cute were suddenly now too Jewish. And part of this Jewish gets wrapped up with New York. New York is very different, and New York, the Puerto Rican guy is using Yiddish and eating bagels, so there's this whole cultural Jewish aspect, which is very, indicative of New York, but that's part of what I'm talking about as well. And that's another topic, interrelated heavily.
Right. How much is negative reaction to the word shiksa generational? Like I'd say with...
I think with each generation it gets less and less.
Right.
Even just because there's less Hebrew, there's less Yiddish, being spoken, so then the words just sound like regular words.
Right.
So I think it diminishes with each generation. As the Holocaust generation dies off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Are there any general things that you tend to love and hate about men?
Oh, this is another topic. I love a man that makes me really feel like a woman, and I'm not crazy about men that make me feel like mom.
So relationships work best when the man makes the woman feel like a woman and the woman makes the man feel like a man.
Yeah, which is
right?
traditional, which circles back to this book in many ways. It's interesting. It's complicated.
Huh. And tell me about the book pitching fair. What do you do when you stand up and you have how long to talk about?
2 minutes.
Yeah.
2 minutes, and they put up signs. 1 minute, like 30 seconds, 10